Welcome to the Killer Innovation Show, the longest continuously produced podcast in history. Each week, Phil McKinney brings you the insights and strategies to amplify your creativity and innovation skills. Here's your host, Phil McKinney.
So how was your week going? This week, I hosted our staff for an outdoor barbecue. 140 people came in to participate, and it was great to see everyone. But I will tell you, it's a little weird. The world feels new. It feels different. Many organizations, as they move forward, they are looking to change. You know, they're seeing staff changes, whether staff come into offices or staff's going to work remote. Maybe customers are buying or engaging more from a digital platform perspective. Investors, what are investors investing in? What are the VCs putting money behind is different. Your competition is changing. The market changed. The world changed over the last year and a half. And all of these can be a trigger to cause an organization to pivot, to go in a completely different direction. And that is today's topic. Today, we're going to talk about what are some examples of pivots, what other organizations have pivoted in the past, what causes organizations to pivot, and what are the key to a successful pivot. So if you are working on your innovation, your business, your product, your services, and you're thinking that you may need to do something different as a result of everything that's going on, but just also to pivot, to create new opportunities for you, this is the show for you. Now, before we get started, I have one favor to ask. So please like, follow, and share. Like this show, give us thumbs up. It's a big help. Follow us on social media. You can follow me on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Twitch. You pretty much name it. You know all the platforms. And then share. Take the link. You can get the link over at killerinnovations.com or wherever you are listening to the show at. Take that link and share it with others. Put it on your social media to let others know that maybe this content would help them think about what it is they are trying to do with their innovation efforts. With that, let's hop into today's episode. I'm sure many of you have heard the term pivot. Pivoting ideas, being an entrepreneur, changing your direction, taking your business in a completely different offering, or even changing the name of your business and working on a completely new idea. Now, when I think about pivoting, I'm thinking about change in direction, change in product, something fundamental that's meaningful, not just a tweak on a feature or tweak on an offering. I'm talking about something that is fundamentally a different direction, that is significant, that is meaningful. Now, many of you may not even be aware that a number of the products and services that you use today are the result of a pivot. The organization, the company you bought it from, was going in one direction and then totally changed and went in a different direction. Let me run through. I've got 7 examples here, and then we're going to get in and talk about when should you consider doing a pivot, how do you do a pivot, and what are some of the things to look out for as you're pivoting your ideas, you're pivoting your innovation effort. But first, let's take a look at 7 companies that made meaningfully significant changes. They made big pivots that ultimately led to their big success. 1, PayPal. Many of you may not know, but PayPal started off beaming IOUs between Palm Pilots. So you basically would take and craft out an IOU. You would beam a digital IOU to the other person. The other person could hold on to that. Maybe, hey, I'm going to give you an IOU for $20. Give me $20 so I can pay for this round of drinks. That is where PayPal started off doing, was these digital IOUs. That was the original idea. Obviously, PayPal today is the major payment platform, payment transaction, and they've acquired a number of other companies that actually also gave birth to what is referred to as the PayPal Mafia. PayPal Mafia are the original founders of PayPal after they cashed out, that went off and used the money they made on PayPal to fund other businesses. The most prominent member of the PayPal Mafia would be Elon Musk. Number 2, Airbnb. Going around today, you rent houses and beach houses and apartments and condos when you want to go to different cities and want to do that in such a way that you're not staying in a hotel and maybe save a little bit of money. But did you know that Airbnb started off focusing on housing for conferences, and it involved air mattresses? So people would literally throw an air mattress on the floor of their living room. You could sleep on the living room and be able to go to conferences and trade shows and events at a much, much lower cost. That's where Airbnb started. Number 3, Twitter. Now, this is one that I actually was personally involved in a little bit. You may not know that Twitter started off as Odeo. Odeo, Odeo. Now, what was Odeo? Odeo was a podcast platform, what we used to call a podcast directory back in the early days of podcasting. And I think I was like show number 5 or 6 on Odeo. And they would put you in the directory. People could go to Odeo and search for, I want a podcast on surfing, or I want a podcast on innovation. And they would find the podcast. You could hit a button, and then you could download the shows and listen to the shows. So I think, like I said, I was probably in the first 5 shows on Odeo in the very early days. And the team at Odeo would email me a lot because I was pretty active in that, in the early stages of podcasting. Well, guess what? iTunes came out with the iTunes podcast app. And what happened to all of those podcast directories, all of those podcast platforms? They went belly up, including Odeo. So Jack Dorsey and the team at Odeo sat back and did a bunch of brainstorming and came up with Twitter. So that's how Twitter came about. Twitter came about as of a pivot from an entirely different business. In this case, the podcast platform. The folklore is that Twitter actually was an internal app used within the Odeo team in order for tech support, so they could talk to each other to find bugs, fix issues, do customer care, those types of things. And then they decided just to take that platform and make it public rather than private. Next up, Western Union. Now, Western Union's been around forever. Most well known for doing telegrams. Now, I think it was, 5, 6, 7 years ago, Western Union sent their last telegram. They do not send telegrams anymore. So what does Western Union do today? Money transfers. If you need to send money, particularly in areas of the world that don't have what I would call mature banking infrastructure, you can do that through Western Union. And just to give you a context, today, Western Union handles just shy of $9 billion, that's with a B, $9 billion a year. And I used to be a pretty meaningful customer of Western Union when we started the work on building the fish farm and then the school in Rwanda. I found that Western Union was the easiest, fast, actually most secure way to send the funds to Rwanda to pay for construction and materials and labor and all that involved in building up the fish farm business, which is a for-profit business, Lakeside Fish Farm. You can go look it up on Google. You just say Lakeside Fish Farm Rwanda, and you can see what we are doing there. And then Ishimwe Pioneer, which is today it's a K through 6 school, and we are just kicking off raising funds for grades 7 through 12, and that is a non-for-profit in Rwanda. But the way we get the money from the U.S. into Rwanda One path today is using Western Union. Next up on businesses in the past that have done major, significant, meaningful pivots is Slack. Slack, yeah. I mean, I'm a big Slack user. I use Slack all the time at work, with the work on the radio show, with the team that behind the scenes edits the audio and prepares it and creates the show notes and puts it up on the Killer Innovation site and all that. We have a team. We have people in the Philippines, people in Washington D.C., people in California. The team that supports this show is scattered about, but Slack is a critical element. Now, you may not know though that the Slack started off as a video game venture called Glitch. That's where it started. And when they couldn't get traction, they couldn't get interest in their original idea, they switched. And what they switched to is that the Slack platform, this messaging platform, was actually a modified IRC, Internet Relay Chat, that they customized for themselves to use amongst the software developers writing the code to create Glitch. So again, this was something where they had created an internal tool, very similar to Twitter with Odeo, in this case, Slack with Glitch, an internal tool. And they decided to take that internal tool that they found so useful and so helpful and pivot and bring that technology, bring that innovation to market. Next, number 6 is Nintendo. Now, Nintendo, if you've been around and you play Nintendo games and, in the arcades, that's how I, when I was, preteen, teenager, playing the early Nintendo games. Nintendo's been around since the 1880s. Yes, 1880s. So they're almost like 140 years old from the standpoint of their existence. Now, they've been in a lot of different businesses. They started off doing playing cards. That's what they did back when they started in the 1880s. Then they switched when playing card business tanked off. They pivoted to being a taxi company. Then they pivoted off to making instant rice cookers. Then they actually pivoted to doing hourly hotels. Yes, hourly hotels. And then they got involved in the early video games. And so today, when you think about Nintendo being in the gaming space, it kind of goes back a little bit to their roots in the playing cards. But they pivoted multiple times over their 140-year history. Now, the last one I want to talk about is one that I grew up with as a kid, and that is Play-Doh. Now, you think of Play-Doh and the different colors of Play-Doh and, your kindergarten, first grade, and you're, mashing it together. And my grandkids have all the Play-Doh kitchen where they can press out green Play-Doh and make it look like lettuce, and red Play-Doh to make tomatoes, and basically build up a Play-Doh hamburger. And I'm the customer and they're playing restaurant. But where did Play-Doh originally come from? Play-Doh was originally a wall cleaner. It was developed to clean up marks on walls. And in particular, it was coal dust. In the early days, when people burned coal in their homes in order to heat their homes, the vents all along the walls would actually blow this coal dust up onto the walls. And Play-Doh was originally created that you would grab it in like a ball and you would tap it on the wall and it pulled the coal dust off the wall. Now, my grandmother's house in Cincinnati had a coal bin down in the basement, and my dad used to tell me the stories of the coal truck backing up to the driveway with a pull down the chute and shovel in so much coal down into the coal bin. And that was my grandmother's house in Cincinnati. And I heard the stories of, using different things to try to keep the coal dust off the walls and off tabletops and all those kinds of things. Well, when we switched off of coal being used for in-home heat and went to oil and then eventually natural gas and electric heat, we didn't have this problem anymore. And so the market for Play-Doh basically dried up. And what happened though is that when they looked into who was using Play-Doh and things that just they hadn't thought about, it was teachers had started using Play-Doh in the classroom. Basically, something the kids can play with their hands. They could make things. They could, use their imagination and create figures and animals and that out of this material. And Play-Doh made a complete pivot from being a product aimed at a very specific purpose, being coal dust removal, to being something that the kids would use. And that, again, is another major pivot. So there was 7, gave you 7 examples of pivots where people were going down one path in the direction of their business, their innovation, and then totally switched directions. So the question you should be asking yourself is, should you pivot? Whatever it is you're working on right now, are you at the point of doing the pivot? And that is where's your original idea? Is your original idea making traction? You're happy with where it's going, or have you hit that wall? You thought this was a really good idea, it just isn't going to pan out. Now, one example that I've shared with in the past on this show is my work on ThumbScan. ThumbScan being a fingerprint biometric security device, and I was involved with it originally as a consultant, but then joined as part of the management team when venture funding was secured from Frontenac Venture Capital. But ThumbScan was a $950 device, very expensive back in the late 80s, albeit fingerprint devices at that time were $10,000 in comparable products. So it was trying to break in, but people just didn't really have an appreciation for the level of security that they needed. And so I worked with, and we ended up acquiring a company called Gordian Systems. And we created a product called PC Boot, and that became the big product. We thought we were going to be in the biometric business, and we weren't. We were in the security business, but a completely different direction, completely different market with completely different technologies. And that was probably my first experience of making a meaningful and significant, the shift. So how do you know when you should do it? Are you hitting a road bump? Is things slowing down? Every innovation is based on a hypothesis. There should be some BHAG, that bold, hairy, audacious goal, that problem statement that you are really locked into, that you're going after. Well, in your original innovation, when you come up with that hypothesis, what have we talked about? You need to test that hypothesis. You need to run experiments. The key here, though, is don't fall in love with the idea. The first idea you work on, the first innovation, don't fall in love with it, because the hypothesis may be a sound hypothesis, but when you go out and you experiment with it, the market's not ready, the timing's not right. What you think is a problem is not a problem. And so, and look, also market changes. Take, Twitter and Odeo. Odeo's chugging along. They were one of the big, podcast platforms, but then iTunes came in and totally wiped out everybody that was doing podcast directories, podcast platforms. And overnight, boom, all of them went to business. So if you think you're at a point of where you need to pivot, how do you pivot? Well, we've talked about this probably 10,000 times on this show, right? Treat it like any other innovation effort. What's your area of focus? Where do you think there's a unique challenge? Where do you think there's an opportunity? What is it that you are seeing that you think there might be an interesting market emerging? Where's your area of focus? And then ideate. Bring in your friends, bring in your neighbors, your family, coworkers, past team members, whoever, and ideate. Ideate. Come up with as many ideas in this particular area of focus that you want to go after. And then what's number 3? Rank them. Take the 300 ideas that you and your best and brightest friends have come up with and rank them. What's the best ideas? And then with the best idea is test them, experiment, execute, right? Do lots of tests, do lots of experiments, validate the idea, see if this is going to be something. So if you're going to pivot, it isn't about just pivoting to the next shiny object. Treat your pivot like you would do any other innovation effort. Focus, ideate, rank it, experiment, execute, make it real, get it out there and validate that what you think is your best idea, others also think are a really good idea. Because let's face it, pivot is much better than bankruptcy. I've did 13 startups before I was part of Telligent. Telligent was my first IPO, where I was part of the original founding team. We grew it. We took it public. We raised billions, with a B, billions of dollars into that business. Very cash intensive, building out broadband networks. But we grew it, and then others took it over. That was my first cash out, being a founder and taking it public. But of the 13 that I had to go through to get there, a number of them went belly up. Number of them just did not survive. And back then, we didn't think about pivot as really a skill set, but it's become a skill you have to have. As an innovator, you need to be prepared to pivot. Meaningful change, not just a little spit and shine on this little element of it or this little tweak. Those all may be valid. But if you're going to pivot, a pivot is meaningful, significant, total change in direction. Odeo, podcasting platform, to Twitter. Big change. Western Union, telegrams, to sending money. Big change. That is what a pivot is. But a pivot is better. Trust me, having lived through watching your idea totally crash and burn and fail, switching to that pivot, taking what you're doing and moving. Now, not all things you should pivot. There's a lot of elements you need to have in place, key elements to make a pivot successful. What are those? One is it's about the team. Do you believe and are you dedicated to the team of people that you've attracted? That's where Twitter succeeded. They brought together a team. They didn't know what they were going to do. These were, friends and people that they admired and people they worked well together. And what did they say? Well, let's podcasting. It's this new hot thing. Let's see if we can't create a better podcast platform. And they created it. When iTunes came out and blew them out of the water, did they all just blow apart and go off and do something else? No, they said, okay, well, no, we still like working together. What's the next thing we can do as a team? So a key element for a successful pivot, in fact, the most critical element for a successful pivot is your belief and your dedication to that team. Because it's not about the idea, it's about the team. A successful pivot is all about the team. And trusting that you and the team can come up with the next great idea that you are going to go over. Number 2, be willing to change. Do not get in love with your original idea and refuse to let go. This is probably one of the hardest challenges innovators have. We become very passionate. We fall in love with our ideas. When it comes to pivoting, you have to be willing to change. You have to be willing to let go and to move on. Take on that new idea. Let go of that idea that you birthed and became very passionate about and etc. Right? But you've got to be willing to change. That is number 2. Number 3 is the speed of which you operate through the pivot. You have to move very, very quickly. You need to do fast ideation, fast ranking, and lots of rapid, quick experiments. You're pivoting. You are letting go of the previous idea and moving to something new, right? The best way to get the team focused is to move quickly. Hold ideation sessions. In fact, Jack Dorsey, when he was at Odeo, and this was even before they came up with the idea or leveraged some work that they were already doing to become Twitter, they were ideating all the time. They would do these brainstorms, all day brainstorms, coming up with ideas and then testing them, coming up with the idea and then sharing it with other people to get their feedback. What did they think about these ideas? And they did it very, very quickly, and they ran some very, very quick experiments. Now, I will tell you, in the early days of Twitter, when Twitter first came out, it was an experiment. In the early days of Twitter, it was not architected like it was today. If you were on Twitter early with me, you saw the famous whale fail screenshot, basically Twitter's version of the blue screen of death, where Twitter was crashed and down, and they had this big whale image that would pop up on the screen if Twitter was unavailable. Because when they did their experiment and it started getting traction, they just launched it. They just put it out in the marketplace, and then they just played catch up like crazy, trying to keep it up and operational, given its absolutely explosive growth of users. So in the case of Twitter, Odeo, they moved quickly, lots of ideas. They ranked them. They got lots of feedback, and then they experimented and executed, and they moved quickly. Key in a pivot is to move quickly. And then the key here is choose something. You don't want to run 5 or 15 or 25 experiments. You need to, once you've got a hypothesis, you've ideated, you've ranked it, you've done some experiments, you're getting some feedback, then choose and execute. Move forward. Go and do something. And that is the ultimate success for any pivot. You commit to that, you need to do something different. What you're doing today is not leading to a path of success. You need to change. And the result is then doing the pivot. But the success is not thinking about the pivot. Success comes from doing the pivot. Make the choice as to where you're pivoting to, and then execute. That is the successful achievement of a pivot. Pivots can be hard on your organization, but they open doors to new avenues of success. With the right team, the right framework, and a sense of urgency, you can create opportunities that you never thought were available to you. So don't be afraid. Think seriously and be deliberative if you are thinking about that a pivot might be the thing you need to do to move forward. Thanks for your time today. Always appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to listen to the show each week. We do greatly appreciate it. We strive to bring you ideas, expertise, and my own direct experience that you can apply to your innovation efforts today. If there's questions that pop in your head or things that you think we should cover here in the show, please do not hesitate. Drop me a note. You can send that to phil@killerinnovations.com. Before we wrap up today, help me pay it forward. We started this podcast back in 2005 based on the feedback from my mentor that I could not pay him back for everything he invested in my career, that I need to pay it forward. I need your help to pay it forward by telling others, inviting others to listen to the show each week. So help me pay it forward. And again, if you have questions, if you have guest suggestions, if you've come across a great book or an article that you've read or a blog post that you thought was very targeted towards the audience for this show, people that are innovators just like you, creatives, inventors, those developing new ideas, trying to create things that are going to make the world better, let me know. I'd love to have them on the show. And with that, have a great week. Find the time, focus on your innovations, and go change the world. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Podcasting nonstop since 2005, this has been the Killer Innovation Show on the Innovators Network.